Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 3:28 p.m. on the 20th of February 2025. It's been a scathing hot day here in Brisbane, Australia, but my cleaning lady Rati's been and gone, and I set up my little bird bath for the crow, and I made a little video of that, posted it on Instagram with him enjoying swimming in it. So it's been a lovely day actually. But I thought I would come in and sit in the air conditioning, which I'm going to turn off because it's actually cold in here. And oh the irony. And read to you some more stories about the chapter on monsters, and just fill up my day with mystery and magic and mythology and awe and joy and delight, and soldier on as I do every day on planet Earth. Right, warrior goddess style. Speaking of soldiering on, yeah, it's not looking too hot, but it's actually healing. It's just getting a bit crusty and stingy, but there's no infection, I don't think. So I'm soldiering on with that too, and healing from that bit of nastiness. So we'll carry on reading Land Monsters, mainly two-legged. I wonder what they mean by that. We're about to find out, people of Earth. Before 1900, which was 125 years ago, in the space-time continuum. Isn't it wonderful how with the power of books we can move backwards and forwards in the timeline, extract information, have it recorded and be able to look back on it all these years later. This is the power of truth-telling and recording your experiences with as much integrity and honesty as you can manage, because you never know what little snippets of information might come back to us at a future time that may be quite useful or edifying or comforting, or give us keys on how to manage life better or differently, or well, anyway, those are just my thoughts about that. So before 1900, an English adventurer named Andrew Battle spent many years in Africa during the 16th century, which would be the 1500s, and upon returning home gave a detailed account of his experiences to his friend Samuel Purchas. That account appears in a famous compilation of travel writings entitled Purchas His Pilgrims, published in 1625. That would make it the 17th century, wouldn't it? There's a little bit of an error there, but shh, don't tell them. According to Battle, who was amazed by all the baboons, monkeys and apes in the jungles, two kinds of monsters were also common, both of them very dangerous. Right. The greatest of these two monsters is called Pongo in their language, and the lesser is called Njiko. I'm laughing because I knew a guy called Jico once. Oh, he was a freak of nature. Oh, he was a pest. But anyway, no harm, no foul. Didn't go there with him. But he stalked me for quite some time. About 2 or 3 years actually at the casino. It was odd. Very odd, given I'd only ever had one coffee with him, and he'd insulted me by telling me that I should come home with him for 15 minutes. Quick as a wit, I said, "Darling, I go home with no man for 15 minutes. The least you can offer me is an hour." And I walked off in a huff. I really didn't give a flying fuck, because I wasn't going to go there with him anyway, but it was just very comedic how I managed that little situation. 15 minutes. Are you kidding me? Seriously. Well, one has to sort of see the comical side of things sometimes. So, this Pongo is in all proportion like a man, but that he is more like a giant in his stature than a man, for he is very tall, hath a man's face, hollow-eyed, with long hair upon his brows. His face and ears are without hair, and his hands also. Right. His body is full of hair. So I just had flashbacks of my ex-husband. His body is full of hair, but not very thick, and it is of a dunnish colour. He differeth not from a man, but in his legs, for they have no calf. What? He goeth always upon his legs, and carrieth his hands clasped on the nape of his neck when he goeth upon the ground. They go many together, and kill many negroes that travail in the woods. Many times they fall upon the elephants, which come to feed where they be, and so beat them with their clubbed fists and pieces of wood, that they will run roaring away from them. Those Pongos are never taken alive, because they are so strong that 10 men cannot hold one of them. Bernard Heuvelmans, On the Track of Unknown Animals. It sounds like he's describing some kind of ape, doesn't it? Especially the part about running with their hand around their neck, carrying hands clasped at the nape. No, that doesn't sound right, does it? It's a bit odd. But anyway, let us carry on with the stories. Here's a picture they've posted here, drawing anyway. An encounter with an ape man in the wilderness of the Pacific Northwest left a young trapper so shaken that years later he still shuddered when he talked about it. Do they mean Sasquatch? Do they mean Sasquatch or some other kind of ape man? Can't quite see it, can we? We'll just take that down. There. Some other kind of ape man. Oh. No, it's stuck to me. Right. The devil's hoof marks were so called by the astounded villagers who saw them appear overnight in rural England in 1855. On the morning of February 8th, which happens to also be my mother's birth date, countless numbers of unidentifiable prints were discovered in the snow around 18 communities in the county of Devon. They were shaped like small horseshoes and ran in absolutely straight lines, one directly behind another, as if whatever had made them had only one leg or a peculiarly mincing gait. In a single night, the unknown beast had travelled about 100 miles, crossing a wide river, and had skulked around houses. In some places it had apparently walked right up walls and along rooftops, and here and there the tracks gave the impression that the thing had actually passed through walls, and roofs. For some time thereafter, people feared to go out after dark, and the superstitious believed that the tracks were made by Satan himself. Again written by Bernard Hervelmans on the Track of Unknown Animals. 2 eyewitnesses drew these sketches of the devil's hoof marks, strange tracks seen in Devon, England in 1855. But knowing the English, it's just probably someone on the piss just making little stamps in the ground. They do that, like when they fake the crop circles. I mean, there are legitimately real crop circles, but some of them are faked by idiots who've got nothing better to do with their time than stir everybody up. Just say, hate people like that. Do something productive with your time. Don't waste our energy on stupidity. I get on the piss down the local pub and think they'll play a prank on the farmers, I suppose. Sometimes it's farmers doing it themselves to bring in tourism. There is that too. I guess you do that when you're desperate. Oh, the things people do for money. Never mind. Just going to close that a bit because it's that magical time of day when I get stabbed in the eyeball again. That wasp is still here. You still hear people of that. Rubbing his back, abdomen. He's probably thirsty. Should I offer him a drink? I guess he'll work it out that I've got water here. Actually, no. I'll offer him a drink. I'm a bit worried about him. I kicked him out the other day. You saw me kick him out, didn't you? On his back. He wants to live with Mama T. Well, at least someone wants to live with Mama T. Oh, you have to laugh. He hasn't seen the drop of water I left for him. Oh well, he'll work it out. A possibly amphibious, worm-like animal of gigantic size was seen in various parts of Brazil during the 1860s. I've heard of the worm, W-U-R-M, in medieval times in Germany, but not of the one in Brazil. Late in the decade, one Francisco de Amaral Varela saw something like a huge earthworm on the banks of the Rio das Caveiras. It was 3 feet thick and had a pig-like snout on what was presumably its head. That would freak me out because worms are not my favourite people. I mean, I have plenty of them in my garden because they're good for the soil, but I try to avoid them if at all possible. I have a worm farm. Very rarely put my hands in it because I don't like slimy worms on my hands. But anyway, when the witness called out to his neighbours, the creature disappeared into the ground, leaving in its wake deep furrows about 3 feet wide. What? That's freaky, people, are they? Really freaky. Wonder where it came from. Right. In 1889, in northeastern Sikkim, Major Lawrence Austin Waddell of the Indian Army Medical Corps found large footprints in the Himalayan snows at 17,000 feet. In his book Among the Himalayas, 1899, he wrote, "These were alleged by his Sherpa porters to be the trail of the hairy wild men who are believed to live amongst the eternal snows, along with the mythical white lions, whose roar is reputed to be heard during storms. The belief in these creatures is universal amongst Tibetans." Theodore Roosevelt was no pushover for a tall tale, but he was impressed by a story he recounted in his book, The Wilderness Hunter, published in 1893. The incident, which had occurred many years before, was related to Roosevelt, as the latter wrote, by a grizzled, weather-beaten, old mountain hunter named Bowman, who was born and had passed all his life on the frontier. He must have believed what he said, for he could hardly repress a shudder at certain points of the tale. When the event occurred, Bowman was still a young man and was trapping with a partner among the mountains dividing the forks of the Salmon from the head of Wisdom River. Not having had much luck, he and his partner determined to go up into a particularly wild and lonely pass, through which ran a small stream said to contain many beaver. The pass had an evil reputation because the year before, a solitary hunter who had wandered into it was there slain, seemingly by a wild beast, the half-eaten remains being afterwards found by some mining prospectors only the night before. But Bowman and his partner were adventurous and untroubled by the tale. They made camp in a small glade and went upstream to set their traps. At dusk, the young men returned. They were surprised to find that during their short absence, something, apparently a bear, had visited camp and had rummaged about among their things, scattering the contents of their packs, and in sheer wantonness destroying their lean-to. The footprints of the beast were quite plain, but at first they paid no particular heed to them. Later they examined the tracks more closely and saw that the intruder had walked upright, but the footprints were not those of a human being. At midnight, Bowman was awakened by some noise and sat up in his blankets. As he did so, his nostrils were struck by a strong wild beast odour, and he caught the loom of a great body in the darkness at the mouth of the lean-to. Grasping his rifle, he fired at the vague, threatening shadow, but must have missed, for immediately afterwards he heard smushing lipstick everywhere, people of earth. For immediately afterwards he heard the smashing of the underwood as the thing, whatever it was, rushed off into the impenetrable blackness of the forest and the night. The two men slept but little after that, and the next day stayed together as they worked. When they got back to camp, they saw that it had again been destroyed and all their camp kit and bedding tossed about. Two-legged footprints showed plainly in the soft earth along the nearby stream. The trappers spent the night sitting by a blazing fire, one or the other on guard, listening uneasily to the sound of branches crackling and something uttering a harsh, grating, long-drawn moan, a peculiarly sinister sound. In the morning they decided to pick up their traps and leave that afternoon. They worked together as before until there were only 3 traps yet to be collected. The sun was high, the traps were only a couple of miles from camp, and the men agreed that Bowman would gather them while the other went back to the lean-to pack their gear. There were 3 beavers in the traps, and it took Bowman some time to prepare them. With considerable uneasiness, he noted how low the sun was as he started for the campsite. At last he came to the edge of the little glade where the camp lay, and shouted as he approached it, but got no answer. The camp fire had gone out, though the thin blue smoke was still curling upwards. Near it lay the packs, wrapped and arranged. At first Bowman could see nobody, nor did he receive an answer to his call. Stepping forward, he again shouted, and as he did so his eye fell on the body of his friend, stretched beside the trunk of a great fallen spruce. Rushing towards it, the horrified trapper found that the body was still warm, but that the neck was broken, while there were 4 great fang marks in the throat. The footprints of the unknown beast creature, printed deep in the soft soil, told the whole story. The unfortunate man, having finished his packing, had sat down on the spruce log with his face to the fire and his back to the dense woods, to wait for his companion. It had not eaten the body, but apparently had romped and gambolled around it in uncouth, ferocious glee, occasionally rolling over and over it, and had then fled back into the soundless depths of the woods. Bowman, utterly unnerved, and believing that the creature with which he had to deal was something either half human or half devil, abandoned everything but his rifle and struck off at speed down the pass, not halting until he reached the beaver meadows where the hobbled ponies were still grazing. Mounting, he rode onwards through the night until far beyond the reach of pursuit. Although Roosevelt himself had no similar experience during his years in the West, he did not seem to dismiss the story as far-fetched. From 1900 to 1970, I'm going to sneeze now. Oh, it's weird. All of a sudden, out of the blue, don't need to sneeze. Oh, dear goodness. An 8-foot, hairy, upright monster wielding a club terrified a party of skaters near Chesterfield, Idaho in 1902. Its tracks, four-toed, were later measured as 22 inches long and 7 inches wide. That really is a big foot. Very big feet. Puts me as a hobbit to shame, doesn't it? Well, 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 people of Earth. It's not the size of your feet that counts, though. It's the calibre of your soul. Just saying. A Sydney surveyor named Charles Harper encamped with several companions on Curruckbilly Mountain in New South Wales, Australia. Had an unnerving experience one night in 1912. Isn't that around the time that they had the picnic at Hanging Rock? Apparently that movie's coming out again. It's the 50th anniversary. I love that story. Oh, that was one of my favourite horror movies to watch as a child or as a young teenager. Oh, I loved that story. The mystery of it all and the awe. We never found out what happened to those girls either, did we? No, we never found out. Just vanished. Anyway. Disturbed by sounds from the nearby woods, the men threw extra branches on their fire, and the circle of flickering light enlarged to include a monstrous stranger. As Harper subsequently told the press, a huge man-like animal stood erect, not 20 yards from the fire, growling and thumping his breast with his huge hand-like paws. I looked round and saw one of my companions had fainted. That's very helpful of them, isn't it? What a hero. Can't rely on them in a crisis. Just saying. He remained unconscious for some hours. The creature stood in one position for some time. It's probably what's called a yowie. They come in two sizes apparently. Some are small, like little pygmy-sized dwarvish creatures, and others can be very large, like Sasquatch. I've never seen a yowie. My daughter took me up to Springbrook to one of the national parks there one evening. She said that if we were very quiet, we might get handprints on our windscreen and that, or on our windows of a car. When you come back, she said, means the Yowies have been and checked out the vehicle. I said, oh, that'll just be other people coming out and campers. She goes, no, it's a known phenomenon. If you go for a bit of a hike in the night, come back, there's all these mysterious handprints. Well, anyway, it didn't happen. She was disappointed because she wanted to show me that there were Yowies there. And Jared was with us too, that's right. So no Yowies, but they probably had us under observation. It got a bit spooky after dark, even though there was no evidence of them being around. There was a strange kind of almost sinister foreboding energy. So we didn't actually hang around too long. We went on our merry little way. I should say its height when standing erect would be 5 foot 8 inches to 5 foot 10 inches. Its body, legs and arms were covered with long brownish red hair, which shook with every quivering movement of its body. The hair in its shoulder and back parts appeared in the subdued light of the fire to be jet black and long. But what struck me was the apparently human shape, but still so very different. The body frame was enormous, indicating immense strength and power of endurance. The arms and forepaws were extremely long and large and very muscular, being covered with shorter hair. The head and face were very small but very human. The eyes were large, dark and piercing, deeply set. A most horrible mouth was ornamented with 2 large and long canine teeth. When the jaws were closed, they protruded over the lower lip. All this observation occupied a few minutes while the creature stood erect, as if the firelight had paralyzed him. After a few more growls and thumping his breast, he made off the first few yards erect, then at a faster gait on all fours through the low scrub. Nothing would induce my companions to continue the trip, at which I was rather pleased than otherwise. So that was back in 1912. Currickbilly Mountain. I don't even know where in New South Wales that is. That's an interesting story. Mr. Harper hastened from the territory of what he thought to be a gorilla, but there is no Australian gorilla. There does seem to be a 2-legged hairy beast or wild man, locally known as the Yowie, which is what I think he was seeing. Or some creature like the Sasquatch that can be interdimensional and vanish as fast as they appear too. It's a bit odd, the Sasquatch stories. They're a bit interdimensional at times. Lieutenant Colonel C.K. Howard Bury, and his companions, making their way from Kata to Lakbala in Tibet on the first Everest reconnaissance expedition in 1921, saw several dark shapes moving about in a snowfield far above them. Got pain in my lymph nodes today, that's not a good sign. Well, I wonder what that's about, people of Earth. Need to drink more water, maybe. Flush it out. Flush whatever it is out. On September 22, when they reached the place where the creatures had been, they saw, at more than 20,000 feet up, numbers of enormous footprints. Lieutenant Colonel Howard Bury stated that at first they looked human, yet they were about 3 times the size of normal human footprints. Then he declared that they must have been made by a very large, stray, grey wolf, which is odd because wolf prints don't look human at all. Pause for thought there. Wonder why he suddenly decided they were wolf prints. Odd. Unless it's a werewolf. But several creatures had been seen. The Sherpa porters were sure the tracks had been made by an upright semi-human they called Mito or Mate Kungmi, snow or wild creature. The journalist later gave it the appellation Abominable Snowman. According to the Sherpas, the snowman is a huge, hairy, half man, half beast that lives in caves high in the mountains. It is bow-legged, its ape-like arms reach down to its knees, and it is so muscular that it can rip up trees by the roots. The body hair is thick and dark, but the face appears to be white and humanoid. Ordinarily, the creatures feed off yaks and snowworms, but when desperately hungry, they go down into the valleys and carry off human beings. And thus began an avalanche of intriguing snowman stories. American miners underwent a harrowing ordeal in Ape Canyon on the east side of Mount St. Helens, another place that has interdimensional UFO activity about it quite often. Heard of that? On the east side of Mount St. Helens in the state of Washington. In 1924, Fred Beck and several fellow prospectors noticed huge footprints around their cabin from time to time and were puzzled by them. Then, one day, they saw a large ape-like creature watching them from behind a tree. One miner fired at it, and the thing ran off, apparently wounded in the head. Next, Fred Beck spotted another such creature standing by the edge of the canyon wall and shot it in the back. It fell off the cliff and was lost to view. That night, at least 2 creatures attacked the cabin, battering at the roof and walls in an attempt to break in. A strip of wood was gouged out from between 2 logs of the cabin, and the men inside heard thumps on the roof that sounded like the blows of large rocks. But the cabin was sturdily built to withstand heavy snowfalls and windowless, and with the door braced from the inside, the creatures were unable to force their way in, neither were they frightened off by gunshots. About 5 hours later, when dawn was approaching, the frustrated callers went away, leaving a muddle of big footprints around the cabin. The miners also left, abandoning both their cabin and their mine. A creature of this type was to become known in the United States and Canada as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. In 1924, one Albert Ostman, a logger and construction worker, decided to spend his vacation looking for a lost gold mine rumoured to be at the head of Toba Inlet in British Columbia, opposite Vancouver Island. On his way, an old Indian boatman told him tales of huge hairy beings, big people, living in the mountains near the supposed mine, but Ostman refused to believe Indian fables about mountain giants, yet he would remember the name Sasquatch. Starting off on foot from the inlet with his rifle, pack sack of food, cooking utensils, sleeping bag and ground sheet, Ostman hiked for a week before settling down in an exceptionally fine campsite between 2 tall cypress trees and near a freshwater spring. The camp turned out to be perfect, except that, in the mornings, Ostman would wake up to find that his supplies had been disturbed and some food taken. One night, attempting to stay awake to find out who his visitor was, he climbed into his sleeping bag, fully dressed but for his boots, which he put loosely into the bag along with his rifle. I was awakened, he wrote, by something picking me up. I was half asleep, and at first I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. My first thought was, it must be a slow slide, but there was no snow around my camp. Then it felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. Hours of uncomfortable travel passed. Stifled and cramped inside the bag, Ostman tried in vain to reach his knife to cut his way loose. Eventually his bearer let him down, dropping his pack-sack beside him, and he heard a strange kind of chatter he could not understand. At dawn, he struggled out of his bag and made out the forms of 4 people, covered with hair and wearing no clothes at all. Osman knew he must be among the Sasquatch giants the Indian had told him about. As it got lighter, he could see that he was in a valley with mountains all around, and that the hairy people seemed to be a family. Old man, old lady, and 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. They made no effort to hurt him, but they seemed intent on keeping him. All except for the girl, who was flat-chested and immature, were quite enormous. Yet, Osman thought them human. Before I go on to read the description, here's a photo of Albert Ostman, seated at right, as described being taken prisoner for 6 days by a family of giant half-human creatures he encountered in the British Columbia wilderness. So there with a very good-looking man, presumably a son or family member, chatting with him. The young fellow might have been between 11 to 18 years old, about 7 feet tall, and might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would be 50 to 55 inches, his waist about 36 to 38 inches. He had wide jaws, narrow forehead that slanted upward round at the back, about 4 or 5 inches higher than the forehead. The hair on their heads was about 6 inches long. The hair on the rest of their body was short and thick in places. The women's hair was a bit longer on their heads, and the hair on the forehead had an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs among women's hairdos. Nowadays, the old lady could have been anything between 40 to 70 years old. She was over 7 feet tall. She would be about 500 to 600 pounds. She had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. She was not built for beauty or speed. The man's eye teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. The old man must have been near 8 feet tall. Big barrel chest and a big hump on his back. Powerful shoulders. His biceps on the upper arm were enormous and tapered down to his elbows. His forearms were longer than common people have, but well proportioned. His hands were wide. The palm was long and broad and hollow like a scoop. His fingers were short in proportion to the rest of his hand. His fingernails were like chisels. The only place they had no hair was inside their hands and the soles of their feet and upper part of the nose and eyelids. I never did see their ears. They were covered with hair hanging over them. After 6 days in such company, Albert Ostman decided that he had had enough. Choosing his moment, he fired his rifle, which so startled the Sasquatch family that he was able to cut and run. Ostman did not tell his story for many years, fearing, with some reason, that he might be disbelieved. But his account of the family of giants rings true, as do the myriad details of his amazing story, written by John Green on the track of the Sasquatch. As Russian troops penetrated the soaring Vanch Mountains of the Pamirs in pursuit of White Army soldiers in 1925, they heard stories from the local people of beastmen who lived in the higher reaches. The soldiers also found footprints and other evidence of some man-like beings. Then, one day, they shot one. The red soldiers had fired into a cave where they thought the whites were hiding. To their surprise, a wild, hairy creature ran out, crying inarticulately, and was killed instantly by the blazing machine guns. Looking at the corpse, the leader, General Mikhail Stepanovich Topilsky, thought at first it was that of an ape. It was covered with fur, he said, but I knew there were no apes in the Pamirs, and, moreover, the body looked far more human than ape-like, indeed, fully human. On closer examination, however, their medical officer declared otherwise. The creature was not a man. But what was it? Could the wild thing they had shot have been the snowman? The corpse, that of a male, was about 5.5 feet long and covered with dense greyish-brown hair, except for the face. These were a few straggly hairs on the upper lip. Sorry, there were a few straggly hairs on the upper lip. Ears, palms, knees, feet, and buttocks. I wonder why there was no hair in the knees and the feet and the buttocks. It's a bit unusual, isn't it? The skin on the hands, knees and feet was coarse and thickly calloused. The face was dark, with dark eyes, a heavy sloping brow, prominent cheekbones, a flattened nose, and a massive lower jaw. Although the teeth were quite large, they seemed to be those of a human. The creature had a broad, unusually muscular chest, but otherwise its torso was much like that of a man. Unable to carry the body with them down the steep slopes, the soldiers covered it with a pile of stones. Odette Chernina, the Yeti. An Indian of the Nootka tribe on the west coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, claimed in 1928 to have been kidnapped by a band of Big Feet. Muchala Harry, a trapper of powerful physique, was an intrepid fellow who enjoyed spending long weeks alone in the woods with his canoe, his traps and his camping gear. Heading for the Conuma River to spend the autumn in his favourite hunting ground, he was afraid of nothing, although others in his tribe spoke warily of the giants in the nearby hills. That's odd, I just heard a distinct vibration over there. Thought it was my phone, but it's not my phone. Odd. Very odd people are there. Sometimes odd things happen. Odd. Yes. At daybreak, after being put down, he saw that he was encircled by perhaps 20 of the big hairy creatures, males and females, at a campsite littered with large bones. Frightened to begin with, he became terrified with the thought that his captors planned to eat him. As they studied him, one or another came forward and touched him, pulling lightly at what they apparently assumed to be his skin. To their amazement, they found it loose, for it was his undershirt. All the while, Harry sat motionless. By late afternoon, the big feet seemed to grow tired of Harry as a curiosity, and most of them departed on what he assumed to be a food-gathering expedition. Left almost unattended, Harry jumped to his feet and bolted. In panic, he plunged right past his camp, ran another dozen miles to the mouth of the Canuba River, where he had hidden his canoe, and paddled 45 miles non-stop back to Nootka. He arrived there, clearly frozen in his torn and soggy underwear, and uttering wild cries, collapsed with exhaustion. Harry was eventually nursed back to health by the brothers of a Benedictine missionary in Nootka, but he never again went trapping in the woods, never again so much as stepped out of the village. Right, they've put in an extra article about the abominable snowman, so I'll read that to you as well. The abominable snowman and his far-flung family. It's a mouthful, isn't it? You can tell I'm still a bit tired and weakened from this wound I have, people of Earth, so I probably should go and have a little lie down and relax, but we're only 58 minutes in, and I might have another video left to read. Yes, there's potentially another video. So we'll read this bit and then we'll carry on, I think, with another video because I am getting tired. Since the sensational term abominable snowman burst upon a startled and delighted world, it has become clear that there is not just one big, hairy, upright hominid haunting the wild places, but a varied and widespread clan. As reports of sightings accumulate, it seems that there may be 3 distinct types of yeti in the Tibetan Himalayan area: small, large, and extra large, all or none of which may be related. Only the large one seems to have any relationship to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the skunk ape of the Everglades, Momo the Missouri monster, and other American varieties. The Chinese ape man bears a strong resemblance to this group, but the Russian Kaptar seems to be in a class by itself. Are these different geographic races of the same species, or several different types with nothing in common but an upright stance and a lot of hair? Indeed, how do they compare? John Green, famous Sasquatch hunter, takes a stab at answering. In very approximate terms, the North American variety is a good deal larger than the others, while the Russian one is taller than the Himalayan, but perhaps not heavier. The Himalayan creature, on the evidence both of its description and its footprint, is entirely unlike a human. The Russian variety, on the other hand, may be very human indeed. For the benefit of those who fear that the killing of a Bigfoot for study would constitute not only murder but the elimination of a rare creature, Green adds firmly that, open quote, there is not the slightest possibility that Sasquatches can be considered human or near human, neither are they an endangered species, close quote. He believes that they are numerous. I don't think that justifies killing one though. Just because someone's numerous doesn't make you worthy of being shot to pieces by some ignorant humanoid. Dear goddess, it's just rude. Anyway, with a few suspect exceptions, Bigfoot is a gentle giant, unduly monsterized by people who cannot conceive of it as a member of the animal kingdom. The Yeti has also been sensationalized out of all proportion to reality. To the Sherpas there is nothing mysterious about it. The creature has been part of their lives and recollections for at least 200 years. Himalayan villagers and hunters include it as just another animal when discussing local fauna. If it seems elusive, it is because its habitat lies far from human paths. Himalayan hunters say that the Yeti is not a man, nor does it live in the snow zone. Its home is in the highest Himalayan forests, deep in almost impenetrable thickets. There it reputedly moves about on all fours or swings from tree to tree. When it ventures into the snow area where mountaineers may glimpse it or its tracks, it walks upright with a rolling gait. The Sherpas suggest that its reason for crossing the snowfields is to seek a saline moss that grows on the rocks of moraines. Ivan Sanderson says that it is not moss they seek, but lichens, which are rich in food value. The American creature appears to be slightly more gregarious and considerably more inquisitive than its Asian counterpart, but it too seems to enjoy a reclusive lifestyle. Skeptics may wonder how it is that so large and supposedly common an animal is able to elude searchers with such ease. In reply, Peter Byrne, founder of the International Wildlife Conservation Society, Incorporated, points out that much of the 125,000 square miles of Sasquatch territory in the Pacific Northwest is heavily forested mountain with few roads, a sparse human population, and almost no visitors. There is plenty of room in this kind of biological sanctuary for Sasquatches and other retiring creatures to live in peaceful, unthreatened isolation. Kind of get that too. It's getting fucking crazy here in Brisbane, Australia. I don't know about what everyone else is experiencing on planet Earth, but man, Mama T might have to go Sasquatch herself and live tucked away in some isolated location away from the fucking maniacs. I already live isolated even in suburbia, so what's the difference, really? Although I'd have to live wild and camp and cook my own food and hunt and fish, and I hate fish. I met one chappie just after Beauregard died. It was a very strange encounter indeed. Very strange. Nice man. He was nice, but he was odd. But he wanted me. I'm trying not to laugh. He was quite serious. He wanted me to go bush with him. He was going to teach me how to hunt and fish, and he wanted to teach me how to eat witchetty. He was a white man, he wasn't Aboriginal. But he wanted to teach me how to eat witchetty grubs and yabbies, all the things that I would not let pass my lips unless I was absolutely starving and had no choice, people of Earth. I find those things repulsive. I don't eat shellfish, for example. I'm just looking at him thinking, why would I do that? And he was like, yeah, and I'll teach you how to, hunt for kangaroo, and we'll eat kangaroo meat. I said, aren't kangaroo full of bloody worms though? Oh yeah, you gotta do something to them, cook them or season. I was like, I'm standing there thinking I'm gonna vomit. I'm like, bleh. I mean, like, I'm a white woman who's grown up in my open air concentration camp in suburbia with food provided to me, meat butchered and carefully cut apart and presented to me in plastic packaging. I'm a domesticated witchy bitch. How the hell would I enjoy having to hunt for my own food? But I tell you what, if you have to, you have to, am I right? Should have gone with that man. I should have got him to teach me everything he knows. Of course, ultimately, he would have wanted sex and some kind of connubial bliss as payment for his knowledge. So I went cold on that idea. People of Earth. It just got a little bit too weird. He didn't do anything to me. He was a perfect gentleman. But that was, our first encounter. And I thought, if I keep seeing this man, he's going to put the hard word on me, and I'm not interested in him. So it wouldn't be fair to lead him along. Didn't think that was fair play either. But anyway, he wanted to teach me how to do gold prospecting as well. So, but I'm still thinking about that. I haven't got round to applying for a gold license, because if you're going to go gold prospecting, you have to have an actual license. And you kind of have to know whose land you're panning for gold on too, because you can get shot if you're trespassing, just saying. So he was going to teach me about that. Well, anyway, maybe I made a mistake. I still know where that man lives, by the way, so I could go and see him and say, mate, teach me everything. But I just, no, it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair, people are there. And then there was another young man prior to that, only about 6 months prior. I think I met him around about March before Beauregard died in 2023. Approached me and my friend Joe at the casino and just pointed at me and said, I'm buying you a drink. Didn't know him from Adam. I just went, Oh, are you, darling? Really? Why do you feel the need to do that? He says, because I want to talk to you and I like you and I want to dance with you and I want to have fun. And I thought, you know what? No harm, no foul in that. My friend Joe freaked the fuck out because he was forthright. Nice young man. His name was Cecil. And the other odd fellow that wanted to take me hunting and gold prospecting, all sorts of odd things, was called Cedric. Cecil and Cedric. You couldn't make this shit up, could you? Seriously, that was their names. But anyway, Cecil was a fine young man. He was Aboriginal, but he was only 14. And he must have had a thing for older women because he was, quite keen on me actually. Didn't get fresh, but he was quite keen on me. And my friend Jo, she kept looking at me going, what are you doing, Tanya? I went, we're just dancing. I've made it clear. I friend zoned him already. Said you're old enough to be my son. Made it clear nothing funny is going to happen. Because I'm an asexual celibate anyway, so nothing was likely to happen anyway, unless, it progressed till he actually dated me and treated me properly. I think he was considering it, the young fellow, but he was just too young. It just feels wrong, when you're 20 years older. It's like, what the fuck? But anyway, he was that young fellow, very nice young man, was a ruse shooter, and I got put off about that because it was his trade. That's how he made his money. He said, I make $4,000 a week shooting ruse. I said, but I'm an animal lover. Can't possibly be with someone who kills animals for a living. He showed me a photo of all the ruse hung up in his truck, and I was like, bleh, bleh. But then I realised later, I thought I'm a bit kind of ignorant and bigoted in a way because it's indigenous and they're hunters in their culture, and he's only doing what is culturally acceptable and amongst his people. So, but anyway, I wasn't comfortable with that because Skippy and and I don't want to be around someone who kills animals for a living, really. Like, I wouldn't even enjoy being married to a butcher. It's just, I do eat meat, but just the thought of it, hacking meat up all day, every day. Yuck! So anyway, but young Cecil was very nice, and he started saying the same kind of things. It's like, come out bush with me and I'll teach you how to hunt and I'll teach you how to find food. He would have been more ideal to learn from because he would have known the traditional Aboriginal ways as well. Like, he would have really known how to find water and food and properly trained, unlike Cedric, who I think was just a bit of kind of I'm not quite sure what he was, a bit of a wild man from Borneo, but a white man. But anyway. But I was intrigued by Cedric because he had made himself a regalia of the Cherokee people, and he had a little certificate on his wall that he was had been what was the certificate for actually? They had I can't remember. Anyway, he was a member of the Cherokee tribal, their religion, and so that was interesting. I did like that about him. He was an unusual, quirky man, but I didn't want to go there with him either because he was, apart from being unusual and quirky, he was just, thought he knew everything about the occult and the paranormal and was actually lecturing me. I was just sitting there playing dumb, smiling and occasionally raising my eyebrows and nodding politely. In my head I was backing to the wall thinking, got a right oily hair. All his information was printouts from the internet and, well, there's no harm in that, getting your knowledge off the internet. I'm reading to you from books, but it was that he claimed to be a professor and that he had a degree in it, and that was a bit of bullshit, people. That was stretching things a bit. But anyway, it's a very weird afternoon. That was the afternoon, 9 days after Beauregard died, when I'd had my regular therapy session with my psychiatrist. And I got in my car and I'm driving up Kessels Road, and this massive big truck nearly took me out. Missed me by that much, just kept sliding to me. And as it's sliding in, I'm watching, I thought, I'm about to die here. I actually thought I was going to die. I turned up at Garden City in quite considerable shock. Ran into that oddball. But like, no harm, no foul. He was a nice enough fellow. You know, but stingy. He said, oh, let's buy a coffee. Oh no, let's go home for a coffee, just to lure me. But honestly, I was in so much shock, I actually went back to his place. I was lucky that he wasn't a complete fucking psycho and a bastard, because he could have attacked me. Anything could have happened to me. But anyway, he did it, fortunately, because I think he saw a bit of blood on my eye, and then I was already, triggered and traumatised over A, my dead dog, and B, almost getting taken out by a truck. So he was kind to me, but there's kindness and then there's not really wanting to pursue a relationship with someone, just saying, Anyway, where was I? I got sidetracked by, yes, reclusive lifestyles. Mamatu might have to go hiding somewhere. I got nothing to hide from. I just have to hold my own at the sacred space and fend off the crazies and the zombies and the maniacs. It's getting full on, people of Earth. Anyway, skeptics may wonder how it is that so large and supposedly common an animal is able to elude searchers with such ease. In reply, Peter Byrne, founder of the International Wildlife Conservation Society Incorporated, points out that much of the 125,000 square miles of Sasquatch territory in the Pacific Northwest is heavily forested mountain with few roads, a sparse human population, and almost no visitors. Yes, I did read that. There is plenty of room in this kind of biological sanctuary for Sasquatches and other retiring creatures to live in peaceful, unthreatened isolation. Yes, I did read that. Well, there you go. Mamatu's floating off into Titania's realm. Hang on, we'll have to whistle her back. Come back, girlfriend. Some lovely birds fluttering about there. Sweet. The question of identity remains. Living in impenetrable woods appears to be characteristic of the larger, hairy, upright creatures everywhere, and suggests that they may be evolutionary dropouts seeking refuge from an inimical world. If a few zeuglodons and plesiosaurs have slipped through the net of time, perhaps the two-legged enigmas are relicts too. Bernard Hervelmans suggests that the wild men of Asia may be leftovers of the race of Pithecanthropus, which occupied Southeast Asia at the end of the Pliocene period, particularly the larger specimens of the ancient ape-man group, called Pithecanthropus robustus, and Meganthropus paleojavanicus. Even pygmy varieties of the species may have survived, accounting for the smaller, unidentified ape-like creatures that are occasionally seen. Zhu Guozing of the Peking Museum of Natural History speculates that the ape-like animals seen in and near Hubei province in the 1970s might have been descendants of Meganthropus, a giant ape man that died out because it lacked sufficient intelligence to adapt to its environment. Other ancients are equally likely contenders. In 1935, Dutch paleontologist Ralph von Koenigswald unearthed a collection of fossil teeth of Asian origin that were virtually identical to human teeth, but 6 times larger. He decided that the specimens must have come from a species of giant ape, probably extinct for 500,000 years, which he called Gigantopithecus. But Gigantopithecus may not be extinct. Zoologist Edward Cronin suggests that during the Pleistocene age, Asian Gigantopithecus sought safety from Homo erectus in the almost inaccessible valleys of the Himalayas, and the relatives of the giant ape, distant or near, may well have found sanctuary in the still unexplored vastnesses of the New World. I'm just seeing if I wish to continue or if we finish here, people of Earth. It's all about Sasquatch or Yeti, so there's only 4 more pages. We'll leave it for another video. We'll stop there. I'll just put a marker here. Right. It's a beautiful afternoon, or almost evening. 4:51 p.m. 20 February 2025. Mama T needs to have a bit of a rest. So on that note, have a wonderful afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. And if you're living in Brisbane, Australia, or Queensland, or stay cool as much as possible. Even maybe go for a swim. Love to go swimming actually. Should just take myself off to South Bank, but then I don't really feel like doing anything with this because I don't want to risk it getting infected in some dirty bloody pool water either. So there is that. Anyway, I'm going to go and have a rest, people of Earth, and in the meantime, stay happy, stay free, stay wild, and wherever you are, remember to never ever let the bastards grind you, me, us down. Bye for now.